The NHL will never be the same as we get major reports coming out from NHL insiders that Gary Bettman plans for the salary cap to skyrocket over the next few seasons, making it quite interesting going into free agency with multiple superstars set to hit the market. We're going to break all this down and more later on this episode. Before we start, just want to give a huge shout out to everyone watching this video. If you're part of the 92.4% that's not subscribed yet and you want to keep up to date on everything to do around the NHL, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. We'll be here all season long giving you updates from around the league. But with that, Darius, we gotta hop straight into this today because this is an insane topic, in my opinion. When we see Elliot Friedman tweeted out the NHL and the NHLPA have released cap estimates for the next 3 seasons, 95.5 million going into next year, jumping all the way up to 104, and then following that season in 2027-28. 113.5 million. Looking at this, you can see the upper and the lower limits. I'm not going to go through this fully, but just looking at this in just the sense of how crazy this is, look at the graph on how the salary cap has looked going in from the 40 million cap limit all the way to where it's going to skyrocket. Looking at this, what was your initial thoughts on seeing such a massive jump for the salary cap coming in over the next 3 years?
I mean, this is crazy. This is going to change the NHL forever, especially with the steep incline that's about to happen over the next couple of years and what's going to follow after that. Now, everyone has to keep in mind that we're kind of in a weird spot right now this season with the NHL salary cap because of what happened over the last couple of years with COVID, right? We had a flat cap through that where, it was expected to rise pretty steadily over the next couple of years in 1920. It didn't do that. So now we're at a point where it's going to rise pretty drastically here over the next couple of years, but it looks like that trend is actually going to continue in 5 years from now, 6 7 years from now. And the salary cap, I mean, right now is at 88 and a bit million. Next year it's going to be 95, so it's going up 7 million, then it's going to go up like 9 million both years after that. So it's going to go up quite a bit. And that doesn't just affect, this is the most interesting part to me, it doesn't quite affect the free agents next year and the contracts that they're going to sign, because there's some pretty big names available this offseason. I think they're going to look, and their agents are going to look at what's available in the next 2 3 years, and they're going to demand that much more money now, because they're going to say, hey, your cap situation is going to open up over the next 3 years, so we want to sign this right now. If I'm going to sign long term, 7 years, 8 years, I want to sign for 16 million, something like that, like a couple of guys we'll get to in a second. So I think that this jump in these projections are actually going to affect this offseason way more than we originally thought.
And I mean, looking at this, the free agents going into this, there is a lot of notable names. Mitch Marner headlining this, Mikko Rantanen. This is going through people's cap hits on the season. Aaron Ekblad, Ehlers, John Tavares, Brock Boeser. I'm not going to name everyone, but you can work your way down this list of 16 people. We're going to dive into a couple names now, but looking at this, just say someone like Mitch Marner was looking at the camp of Toronto and saying, hey, I'm looking at around 12 million. Do you think with the new reports coming out, maybe Mitch is going to start looking at more of the 13 and a half, $14 million range?
Well, I've been on the side, or at least of maybe trade Mitch Marner, or depending how the playoffs go, let him walk in free agency, because the reports are he wants somewhere in like the 13 to 14 million dollar range, and I think the Leafs can only afford to pay him 12, or at least less than Austin Matthews. But now with news like this, again, I feel like he's going to ask for like 14 or 15 million at this point, because he's going to say, hey, the salary cap's going to jump $9 million every year for the next couple of years. I want to see this back. If I'm going to sign for 6 or 7 years right now, I want a significant raise right now, because you're going to get a deal if you're the Leafs, let's say, that re-sign him in 3 years, right? You're going to get a deal, quote unquote. And obviously Matthews' contract was designed so it's up in a few years, so he can take advantage of this as well, and other players as well. So I think this really, really impacts a lot of teams heading into next season, because they're going to sign contracts and guys like Marner and Rantanen to these crazy deals this season because of these projections. But what happens next season when the salary cap hasn't raised that much, right? So that's going to be the most interesting part to me. But again, there's a lot of names, Mark. If you can bring up some of these names again that are free agents this year. I mean, Mitch Marner and Mikko Rantanen are going to demand big money. Aaron Ekblad could potentially, price himself out of Florida at this point, because he's going to be making far more than that, I think, on his next deal. Nikolaj Ehlers is going to be making far more than that, right? He's probably going to be in double digits as well. Even John Tavares, I mean, what happens with that contract now? He might have, with these projections made a little bit more money. Maybe he's making 7 million again next year, something like that, right? So there's some big names not only up for grabs, but what are they going to make now with these projections? If you're their agents, if you're the players, you're going and saying you're going to get a deal here in the next couple of years. So I want to sign for big money right now if you want me long term.
And I mean, looking at Rantanen as one of the names, we've seen the Colorado Avalanche move on from him because it seemed like he was demanding upward to 14 million, wanting to be paid the highest paid player in the entire National Hockey League. So looking at Rantanen coming off his 9.2 million, we know the Carolina Hurricanes did acquire him. They do have quite a bit of cap space going into the offseason. But like you said, it's going to get very interesting on how agents, players, how the league is going to look at this. If a player wanted 14 million and the cap's set to raise 9 million more, maybe they're looking at this, hey, if the cap is raising so much, why don't I deserve an extra 2 million on this next deal? If it's going to get smaller and smaller against the cap each season, the names on this list, like you said, with the cap going up this much, it's going to get quite wild on how things work around the league. I mean, a couple of guys might start asking. Brock Boeser is a name that has been in the rumor mill, as the Canucks doesn't seem like they want to reach his $8.5, $9 million ask. This could jump as much as 11 million. I'm not sure if we're going to see it happen too much at the start of this or end of this season at trade deadline, but I could see a lot of teams looking at making moves, moving out players that are coming out as a UFA or RFA to not have to worry about dealing with the first round of what it's like with this cap raising so much. But Darius, looking at this, there is some positives. I mean, looking at some players that are already signed, players like Hronek on this list, Noah Hannafin, Seth Jarvis, these guys going into the first year of their 8-year deal on contracts at around $7.5 to $8 million. Do you think this is where most NHL teams really benefit when it comes to the skyrocketing cap out of nowhere, it seems like?
Oh, 100%. Some of these teams like Carolina are going to benefit from this huge over the next 3 years, right? Because Seth Jarvis, like a young budding superstar in this league, just signed that contract last year. And I mean, it's just going to get better year after year. The Hurricanes are going to have so much money to work with as that contract matures. Even William Nylander, who I think is, one of the best players on the Leafs, one or two, that's for sure. When he signed for 11.5 last year, a lot of people were like, that's a lot of money for William Nylander, but he's shown that he's, a premier star in this league. He's worth that money. And as the years go on now, if the salary cap goes up $9 million each year, it's just going to look that much better. But again, we have to keep in mind, as the salary cap goes up, a lot of these prices on the guys who have to resign will now go up because guys this offseason, like we're talking about, are going to be like, well, you know what? Now I'm worth $3 million more, right? So there's going to be less cap to go around in that way, I guess. But I think some of those contracts, like Nylander, like Seth Jarvis, for example, are going to mature really, really well for those teams and actually are going to work out much better than we originally thought.
I mean, looking at this, what's your guys' thoughts? Who do you think's really going to demand more money going into free agency? Is it someone like Mitch Marner or Rantanen that's going to end up hitting the market and getting paid more than they were expecting going into it? What contracts are going to age the best? I mean, Justin Hull's my answer, joking. That's not going to get any better no matter how much the cap rises. But sorry, Detroit fans, what's your guys' thoughts? Go down and leave a comment below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back with another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, my co-host, Darius, and take care.